Welcome in to the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm Paul Kuharsky. Can you smell it? It's EDLEY'S barbecue. I can smell it. I'm actually taking home food today. Leon doesn't know it yet, but I'm ordering food to take home. Yeah, I want 3 orders of ribs with no sides to take home. No sides. 3 orders of the fried ribs. You don't have the fried ribs today. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. They're sold out. That's how much people want those ribs for the game this afternoon. So my plans are changing. Happy New Year. Paul Kuharsky, paulkuharsky.com. Here's Leon.
National hot catfish, though.
Oh, hot catfish.
Yeah.
My mom, my
potatoes.
elderly mom is not a hot catfish person.
Loaded
Loaded baked
baked potatoes.
potatoes. I'll
Whatever
consider,
fucking
and we'll
you
talk
want.
later. Leon makes the best margarita in Nashville. There is somebody like Leon at every EDLEY'S in Nashville, and you know there are EDLEY'S all over and around Nashville. I'm at 5 Points in East Nashville right now, 1004 Woodland Street. You can go to Sylvan Park, Donaldson, Franklin, and Berry
Ain't nobody
Farms.
like Leon.
Ain't nobody like Leon. Franklin and Berry Farms, my home base. Franklin and the Factory, Gallatin, 12 South, Nolensville. My plan to take home ribs has been foiled. Also brought to you by ZENSPORTS. Appreciate you coming in. Good morning, CW. Happy New Year, Russell Jones. Hope everybody is off to a good New Year. Unfortunate that the game this afternoon was delayed, but looking forward to getting home and catching some of that. JT Runke in the Titans press room producing this and wearing shockingly plaid flannel, which is what he does best. Look, we're going to talk about the need for the Titans to lose this game. Their talk about offensive growth, which got on my nerves today and this week. Meaningless defensive numbers that they have posted. An Amy Adams Strunk scenario that could come to fruition next week if she decides to make some moves. Incentives and some numbers for some offensive guys to hit. Momentum out of the last game, which I think is a big bullshit myth. Uniforms, because they are wearing the throwback Oilers uniforms, which creates a lot of conversation every time it comes around. Welcome in. Happy to see you. Go subscribe to paulkuharsky.com. I'm about to help you understand everything that goes on with this team as the season concludes, as Amy Adams Strunk does whatever she does or doesn't do, and where they need to go from here, with, of course, the help of Blake Bedingfield and Mike Herndon. Well worth $750 a month. I hope you come join me. I'll tell you a route you could get there through ZenSports in a little bit. Let's dive right in. First off, lose away. Look, I am not a proponent of tanking in any way, shape, or form, but now they are on the doorstep of at least the number 2 pick, number 1 pick with help, right? They could drop from 2 to as low as 7 or 8 if they win this game and things fall poorly around them on Sunday. That drop from 2 to 7 or 8 is 1,000 points. Mike Herndon looked at this, 1,000 points on the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, which is still the backbone of most of the value charts that teams use when they're determining how to make deals with draft picks. That 1,000 points is the equivalent of the 14th pick in the draft. All right. So some people didn't get this when I wrote about it in the piece I have up about why they need to lose this game. The Titans can't afford to do away with the 14th pick in the draft. Now, I've been all about winning throughout. And they don't need to outright tank to lose a game in the NFL. They're very good at losing games. Just get out of their way and let them lose. Now, I would hope that Tony Pollard's not healthy enough to play this game. Tajay Spears shouldn't clear the concussion protocol in a week after having had a concussion earlier this season. And they should protect Tajay Spears. 2 concussions in a season. Don't hurry him back. Shut Tajay Spears down. Give this backfield to Chestnut and to Kelly. and to small. And let them see what they can do. You've got some incentives at play here. We will get to it. Titans need to lose. That is assure them of the second pick in the draft. If New England also wins at home against the Bills, Titans would get the number 1 pick in the draft. The Bills have clinched the number 2 seed. Josh Allen will start that game to keep his consecutive game streak going, but that'll be brief. And then Mitchell Trubisky will take over. Patriots also don't want to win that game. But, you don't know. It's very unpredictable what happens in these games where teams technically don't want to win. Pollard has incentives. Ridley very much wants to get the yardage that he needs to get to 1,090-something yards. We'll get to that. So the Titans want those things on offense. They're going to play both quarterbacks, Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. Can you outright pull guys? Look, the guy who's in charge of that is Brian Callahan. Brian Callahan should make some decisions, lineup decisions. Like, they're not going to start Trevor Siemian, right? They're not going to pull J.C. Latham. They're not going to sit Jeffrey Simmons. I don't think. Jay here is saying I wouldn't play Simmons, Sweat, Key, Hooker, Skoronski, or Latham. I don't think you're going to see widespread lineup changes like that are a clear intent to lose. But I do think we could see some minor stuff, and I think the Titans are pretty good at losing. Houston apparently intends to play people. Now, intending to play people and playing people for the whole game are two different things. I hope there's no motivation to win against the Texans because they're the Texans, because the Titans are in Oilers jerseys, and because Amy Adams Strunk loves beating the Texans. I wrote a piece earlier this week. I hope you'll go read it. It's not behind the wall, about how Amy Adams Strunk, if she isn't aware of it, if she doesn't have a handle on why beating the Texans on this particular Sunday, in this particular season, under these particular circumstances, is not good for the long-term health of the franchise. She needs to be, for it to be spelled out to her by people who also don't benefit from them losing it. It's not necessarily good for Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker to have a 3-win season. It's better for them to have a 4-win season. But they've got to take one for the long-term health of the franchise. They all do. Again, I don't think outwardly not starting those guys. Maybe you pull some of them a little bit early. But, and here Mark Hankins says we need some of the late season OL additions and the young linebackers to play. I don't think Isaiah Prince or Price, he played so poorly I can't remember his last name, is going to play or be there to be active. Now, the young linebackers, sure, let's see James Williamson. Let's see Cedric Gray. Baker didn't do a damn thing. And I'm fine with that. Those are not blatant attempts to lose. Do I think Amy's mind is made up, Robert asks? Or for some reason, do I think Sunday's game will have a bearing? I think her mind is made up on Callahan and that Callahan is back. I talked to some people who have no idea what's going to happen with Rand or with Brinker, and we will talk about that later. Any insight into how the quarterbacks will split time? I don't think they know for sure exactly what they're doing. They've split reps. Playing. They had a walkthrough yesterday. They're having a full practice today. It's going on right now. The plan is for them to split the work 50-50, and Brian Callahan's going to tell us tomorrow what the plan is for the game. Now, he said he's not going to go away from a hot hand, but he intends to play them both. So this is, Jabari, this is dangerous thinking that the Titans are not winning, laugh out loud, already a preseason roster. That's when a team pulls a surprise. Let's get a little bit more into this. Here's Brian Callahan on offensive growth. What has he learned this year? Let's listen to him, watch this video, and then I've got some real commentary on this.
There's an adjustment and a learning process on what those look like for me to get a feel for guys. I think as the years gone on, particularly a guy like Calvin, found a lot of things that I thought he really did well and tried to highlight those. Same things with the quarterbacks and with Tony Pollard and how we use Tajay. There's a lot of things I've learned about those guys as players and what they do well. So you try to highlight those as much as possible. Those are same thing in the run game with the run game scheme. What do we block well? What fits us best? We have all the ways to get to the run schemes that we need to. So all those things offensively, you work through all of it and you find what guys do well and how you can best feature those things. So feel good about where we've gotten to. A lot of things that I think I learned along the way that helped put guys in better spots as the season went along, especially as I got to know the team better and know their strengths better. So
look, we've talked about how all of this stuff was too slow. And I like Brian Callahan's forthrightness a lot. And I think he's got a chance in the long run. But to say heading into their last game that he's gained a feel of how to utilize his people better makes it sound like they've actually done something, like stuff really happened. Nothing's happened. One thing looks like progress is scoring. In the last 3 games, they've averaged 23 points. They're up to 18.5 points per game. They're out of the 17 range. I mean, Holtz said they're a mid-level offense if you take out the first 4 games. Woo! Hoo-hoo-hoo. They hired an offensive coach. They signed Calvin Ridley. They brought in, they set it up with running backs who could catch the ball more in the flow of the game, and who've been, Pollard certainly has been good. Still, they just scored 13 points against the Jaguars and lost to them a second time, and they scored a total of 19 points against one of the worst scoring defenses in the league in 2 games in the span of 3 weeks. Callahan's making it like he's figured out over time how to better use Ridley, how to better get them into the best run situations, how to better use Pollard, as if that stuff made things happen. I mean, is this team better than it was weeks and weeks ago? Maybe a touch. The results aren't better. How many games have they lost in a row since they beat Houston? 6? I mean, they were down to the Colts 38-7, game over, before they got it to 38-30. They were down to the Bengals 31-14 before they cut it to 37-27. So they made a couple of those games look decent. They made them look decent. Ridley said, towards the end, we're starting to see how to use each other, how to be around one another. Coaches are starting to figure out how to use us. I think we're getting better slowly in some areas. Coaches are figuring out how to use us. I think we're getting better slowly in some areas. It's week 18. Learning slowly how to use us. Getting better in some areas. The win area is the area that matters. Not this week, not anymore. But, I mean, come on. I mean, on the one hand, that's an honest assessment of what they've done and who they are. So I appreciate that. And he's not trumpeting it as some big accomplishment, but he is, talking about what they have done, and what they have done is so freaking small. So small. It's reduced expectations to such a tiny level. Ed Henry, always here. Always appreciate you, Ed. His biggest complaint, it sure seemed to him that Levis had to adapt more to Callahan's system than the system adapting to Levis. Well, I will say that certainly felt like the case early. I think when Levis had his good stretch, they were letting Levis do Levis things. Russell Jones says, learning slowly. This isn't a slowly league. And I agree with that. Now, some teams, Detroit's used as an example. Detroit started slowly. Detroit started slowly with its current regime, and I think the Titans pin a lot on that. I think Amy Adams Strunk pins a lot on that because Detroit's owner is her friend, and she's modeling things after that. And so I think there are decent odds that she's going to see in the Titans hope that they can follow the same path that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are following. But she doesn't have Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. I think that's pretty fair. Jimmy Morris sets off something I have on my sheet here. I hit the wrong thing. Jimmy Morris, is there a scenario where she fires Rand but keeps Brinker? I don't think this is a good scenario. But if she wants to hedge her bets, right, and we're all saying to a degree, and we know Callahan's going to be back, so the people who are in jeopardy are Rand and or Brinker. Rand and or Brinker are in jeopardy next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, say. And to a lot of us, it doesn't make sense to come hire a new general manager who's got a coach that he didn't hire, who you might then fire in another year if things don't go well. And then you've got the GM and the coach again, not on the same timetable and not necessarily of the same mindset, though you do the best you can to match them up. But the Titans have long had problems of guys not being on the same clock. Now, Vrabel and Robinson, eventually got on the same clock contractually. But again, one was here 2 years earlier than the other. Now, Robinson hired Vrabel technically. And so you had that, and that was okay. But really what you want to do is hire them on the same timetable. And so could she, depending on who's in her favor right now, we know that there's always somebody who's more in her favor than somebody else. If Brinker's in her favor, could she say, all right, I don't like Rand anymore, and Brinker's doing all the stuff except for final say on personnel. I'll toss Rand. I'll elevate Brinker to beyond what he already is, which is president of football operations. I'll make him president of football operations and GM, and he'll do everything now. He's been involved in our personnel process, so it's not a drastic change where he's got to come in and get used to our scouts and all of that. I give him the additional responsibility of GM, so it's not an outsider coming in. And I go with Callahan and Brinker, and Brinker's aligned with Callahan. He helped us hire Callahan. And I go forward with these two and see how that works. And if it takes off, terrific. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to be firing both of them and hiring someone new in both of those posts on the same clock. Is it great? No, but it kind of pushes out the decision-making on the coach and doesn't misalign a GM with a coach that GM had no role in hiring. Now, I think, the title thing and the structure from the beginning last year has been Brinker is president of football operations, and Rand is executive vice president and general manager. Brinker is technically more powerful in the organization than Carthon. This, Jeremy, is too simple. You can't say Rand picked Callie. He's saying they're hitched now, regardless if they get fired this year or next, pending a collapse next season. If one goes, the other must. Well, that's not how it worked with Robinson and Vrabel. Vrabel got more time than Rand. They're not linked that way. And Rand didn't exclusively pick Callahan. This seems to be growing, like this idea that Rand hired Callahan. Rand and Brinker and Torricelli and Burke Nihill. There was a big committee of people involved in the selection of Callahan. Now, how much was it Rand's, we don't know, but it was in no way like Rand went out and hired the general manager. Not at all. Now, they all agreed. Amy ultimately did the hiring, and and as part of that whole thing, she came up with this structure. Um, wasn't Vrabel fired partly because of the vagueness surrounding who is making decisions? Well, yeah, they didn't. I mean, he was hired because they were having personality struggles, and he didn't think Rand was qualified. Frankly, he didn't think Rand was good enough to be the GM, and so he was leaning with Ryan Cowden, who was an underling. But they weren't all in sync, and she wanted sync to be number one. Somebody said something about Shanahan getting fired. I can't see Shanahan getting fired. Isn't it fair to say that it isn't practical to invite franchise instability when the roster is, being kind, mediocre? It seems early to blame Rand for this particularly mediocre roster. Well, you could say that on one side, yeah. And I tend to think that should stick with this whole thing a little longer, give it at least one more year to try to put itself together, particularly if you're not going to be drafting a quarterback. But I mean, the state of the roster is also a reason to change. Like, hey, we don't have many prime guys, and we don't like what's been chosen, so let's let somebody else do the choosing since we're close to the bottom. This idea that Lynch being the GM, I mean, Lynch is a GM that doesn't have a lot of power. Shanahan is the figure who Shanahan's the power in San Francisco. There are coaches that have that kind of power. You look back to Seattle and Green Bay, Holmgren. Well, he was that kind of power coach. Audrey says, is it unfair to look back at the Vrabel hire and second guess that we should have hired LaFleur as head coach instead? I mean, yeah, it's 6 pretty good years out of Vrabel. And LaFleur went and inherited Aaron Rodgers. He's turned into a great coach. But at that time, who was more ready to be the Titans head coach? I think the Titans got some pretty good years and some pretty good coaching out of Mike Vrabel. And I think it's hard to say LaFleur would have been what LaFleur is here, given the difference in quarterback and organizational structure and quote unquote ownership. Green Bay doesn't have ownership, but and CW is clarifying. So some are saying Rand built the 49ers. He wasn't even the GM, and the GM there doesn't even do most of the building. I mean, I'm surprised how many fans want to give Rand Carthon credit for what's gone on in San Francisco. Rand had good drafts. I mean, Rand drafted Will Levis. It traded up to draft Will Levis. If you miss on a quarterback, now Vrabel had a hand in that, but if you miss in a quarterback, you get downscored for that. Rand drafted a guard at number 11, and Skoronski's going to be a good player, but he's not going to be a great player. And if you draft a guard at number 11, he needs to be a great guard. Rand drafted Tajay Spears in the 3rd round. Tajay Spears is not the starting running back. He's a good player. Just on those picks alone from his first draft, you can't say that he's drafted well. And then this year, his first round picks moving backwards, leaving some questions, at least to outsiders, as to whether he's an absolute left tackle, Latham. Brownlee's good, absolutely. Sweat needs to do more in the pass rush, but he's not an absolute home run yet. In 2 drafts, no blue chip absolute star. Vrabel absolutely helped in screwing up the roster. I'll say that. Andre Dillard was largely a Vrabel deal, but they didn't have money and they didn't have a lot of capital, and they saw a guy who they thought had a chance to be a left tackle. They took a flyer. It's a bust. I mean, it's a terrible move. Well, Vince, if Amy's looking to follow the Lions' success, he says Detroit scored with the cast-off quarterback in Jared Goff, not a high draft pick. So where do the Titans find a reclamation project like that? Well, Detroit scored with the cast-off quarterback in Jared Goff, trading a blue-chip quarterback in Matthew Stafford. So, I mean, if you want them to exactly follow Detroit's path, then they'd have to have a blue-chip quarterback like Matthew Stafford to trade to get a lot back. So they can't do exactly what Detroit did. They don't have exactly Detroit's situation. CA says Ryan and Callie will get more time because this team isn't good enough to make a run next year, no matter what. I only see Amy paying 3 GMs and coaches if she feels we can't make a run. If she feels we can make a run. Yeah. She paid 3 coaches 1 year, Malarkey and Wisenhunt and Vrabel. She paid 2 coaches for 2 years before that in Wisenhunt and Malarkey. And Vrabel's going to come off her books this year when he gets hired. And J-Rob's only got 1 year left. I don't think the finances that are as big a deal as people think. I don't think Amy's nearly as involved in some of the draft picks as people want to believe. S-Rob is saying, do I have any idea how involved she is in the draft picks? Was she involved with the Levis pick after the Stroud trade up was unsuccessful? I have no evidence that she wanted Will Levis. I'm sure she and everyone knew that they needed a quarterback and wanted a quarterback. Highsmith, Brinker and another personnel guy I can't think of. Howie the Titans says are from Green Bay and are now with the Titans. Green Bay continues to show organizational success, so he'd be in favor of Brinker as the GM. I'm not sure where Anthony Robinson came from. Highsmith is in the Titans front office, and he is a former Green Bay guy. Let me tell you about ZENSPORTS. ZENSPORTS, longtime sponsor of this excellent podcast. Go to ZENSPORTS if you're in Tennessee. Download the app. You get a no-danger first wager bonus. It's a tremendous way to start an account. If you lose your first bet, you get refunded up to $1,000. Use the code TNPaul, TNPaul. You can bet up to $1,000 on anything up to plus 500. You win the bet, you're in the money. You lose the bet, within 24 hours, you get the money back. And with at least a $10 bet in that scenario, you get a free year subscription to paulkuharsky.com, $81 value, pretty good deal. Do we have bets for you to win? We do. Look, Cleveland's getting 17.5 at Baltimore. Now, I understand that Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Bailey Zappi are playing this game. One of them is starting. If it's Zappi, how about this? He'll be the 40th quarterback to start for the Cleveland Browns since 1999. Cleveland plus 17. It's just too many points. Baltimore needs to win the game, but they'll win it by 14, 13. They're not 17.5 is just a massive number. I don't care who's playing. I also like Minnesota plus 2.5 against Detroit. Just think Detroit's too beat up. That game's for the number 1 seed in the NFC. JT, who's been pretty clutch over the entirety of the season, likes the Jets plus 1 at home against the Dolphins, and he sees that as the Aaron Rodgers swan song game, with Aaron Rodgers stepping up for the Jets, Jets. Cleveland plus 17, Minnesota plus 2.5, Jets plus 1. No danger, first wager, ZENSPORTS. Use code TNPaul to get yourself started then. ZENSPORTS, 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 the place to bet if you live in Tennessee. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 and in Tennessee to bet. Let's talk about the defensive improvements the Titans have made. There's some talk about defensive improvements this week. Here's Brian Callahan on the defense.
Yeah, I think there's things that we did improve in. There's areas of our defense I feel good about, both from a execution standpoint and a schematic standpoint. We'll look at all of it. There's certainly things that we have to get better at, namely some of our the red zone defense and things of that nature where we give too many points. Whether they were put in those positions fairly or not is, you can debate that, but we need to be better stopping people down there. We'll look all through those things and try to find, all the areas that we can really improve our defense. And there's areas that matter, when you're going to be good against the pass if you're getting the ball run on you. So those things are give and take, and not every game is that way, but certainly things that we have to be better at all the way around. And numbers tell a story. They definitely paint a picture. They tell you where you have some strengths, but ultimately it's, you can find a lot of numbers, right? It's not always going to paint the fullest picture. And I think there's definitely things we got to get better on across the board. I mean, 1-3 games. So for me to sit here and say everything's been good enough, it's not been, but there are some things I'm encouraged by, and there's some things we got to get better at.
Yeah, so let's look at some of these numbers because I think there's too big a perception that the Titans defense has gotten better. And today, just an hour or two ago, Denard Wilson said, like, the injuries have handcuffed him to they can't do what they want to a large degree, and he's had to accept that. But yards per game, they've gone from 17th to 2nd. All right, that's good, nearly 30 yards better. But yards don't win games. Titans have gone from 15th to 30th in points, from 21.6 points a game allowed to 27.3 points per game allowed. Yeah, special teams and pick sixes count against them. And there are 5 touchdowns there. They allowed a punt return, and they've had 4 pick sixes. So let's take those out. I took those out of the scoring, and they'd be tied for 26th. So they've gone from 15th in scoring defense, a bad team last year, a team that got Mike Vrabel fired, gone from 15th to 26th. 26th with bad turnovers that put them in bad sudden change positions, bad return games that have put them in bad positions, but nevertheless, 15th to 26th. Red zone, they were first in the National Football League last year, 33.7%. This year, they're 28th, 66% touchdowns scored against them in the red zone. They're twice as bad as they were last year in the red zone. So anybody that's telling you the Titans defense has gotten better in any substantial way, you got to hit them with this. The red zone defense is twice as bad, 33, almost 34% to 66% touchdowns. That's awful. Here's some J-Rob talk. Focus says J-Rob had terrible drafts. He moved up to get Des Fitzpatrick. He screwed the cap. He could not draft offensive linemen, and he kept reaching for injured players. Rand has a higher hit percentage so far, in my opinion. What Focus is doing here is comparing late J-Rob to early Rand. And what he should be doing, in my estimation, is comparing early J-Rob to early Rand. And early J-Rob, in his first draft, right, had Jack Conklin, an All-Pro, and Derrick Henry, an All-Pro, and Kevin Byard, an All-Pro. Now, J-Rob got really bad at the end. No questions asked. But what J-Rob did at the beginning was stock the Titans with players that took them to an AFC championship game. Stock the Titans with players who helped them get a number 1 seed. Do we think that these first 2 classes of Rand Carthon's term have done that? They haven't. Do you think these guys are the core of a team the way that Conklin for his 4 years was and the way that Henry and Byard were? Find me a Henry and Byard in these first 2 classes. You cannot, because they are not here. Now, you want to compare year 6, I understand. If we get to Carthon, we'll compare year 6. Robinson severely sank as his career went on. But his first 2, 3, 4 drafts, a lot of good players in there. A lot of good players. And that draft I just listed off, I mean, you find 3 All-Pros right away when you had the first pick in the draft and traded out of it and still miss on Kevin Dodd and still do fine. Well, this is that draft for the Titans. Can they trade? And now the talent in this draft pool is not as good. So that's unfortunate. Talent in this draft pool is not as good. But can the Titans pull off something similar, even if they stay put, and maybe they get themselves a quarterback there? Maybe they, Shedeur Sanders goes number 1. They don't like Cam Ward. Then they should be able to trade out for Cam Ward, even a spot or 2. Get Abdul Carter, get some more capital, get your 3rd back at least that you gave up for L'Jarius Sneed. Can you come out of there with linchpin players at defensive end, at right tackle, at wide receiver? Pro Bowl caliber players, all-pro caliber players. That, to me, is the fair comparison to me. That, to me, is the fair comparison. Let's talk incentives. We talked about them earlier. Tony Pollard, he's got a bad ankle. He's held out last week because he had a bad ankle, and then on top of the bad ankle, he had the flu. Titans left him at home. So he gets $250,000 for running for 1,100 yards. He needs 83 yards. He gets $100,000 for 7 rushing touchdowns. He's at 5. Those are big numbers. I mean, he could earn conceivably $350,000 on Sunday. I'd rather he didn't play, but Titans are talking about giving him every chance to earn those. Everybody knows, to quote Will Levis, that Calvin Ridley needs 59 yards for 1,000, which would be his 3rd 1,000-yard season. There's no money attached to that, but Calvin Ridley really wants his 3rd 1,000-yard season. And Callahan has talked about these things, and he wants to help these guys attain these numbers, particularly the Pollard stuff. He doesn't want to deny a guy who's, been a key player for them a chance to make this money. Here's Nick Holtz on Titans guys having a chance to reach their number or reach their incentives.
It's obviously on the front of your mind. Tony's a little different because he's just hasn't been healthy. So it's, if he can go and we'll try to get him there and try to get him some touches. And, I think it'd be helpful for probably both of them. If Calvin's in and Tony's in, they kind of don't know who's kind of getting it. And so it might help us that way if they're both ready to roll. But with financially, you always want to help those guys. And with the way he's given his body to the organization this year and really kind of laid it on line for us, I think we'd love to get it for him.
They'd love to get it for him, and that's understanding. Can you get it for him and not get in the way of you losing the game? That's a big question. Yeah. Jim Wyatt, so Josh F. says, seeing Jim Wyatt's post that this year's D has a chance to be the franchise best feels like a kick in the nads after watching this team all season. I mean, there's so much context there. It best in yardage, and it's the best in yardage because the special teams gave up huge returns and the offense turned the ball over deep in Titans territory. And so there weren't that many yards for other teams to gain. I mean, this is not the Titans' best defense in history. Factually, it may be by yardage, and that's fine. But if you have eyes and you've watched this team play defense that hasn't turned the ball over, that hasn't sacked the quarterback, and that hasn't stopped people from scoring, and that hasn't stopped people from scoring in the red zone touchdowns, it is in no way near being the best defense in Titans history, in no way, shape, or form. So that's what stats can do to you. Would I rather have a head coach quarterback Sanders combo or keep Rand and Callahan? The two are not mutually exclusive. You could have a head coach Callahan Sanders combo. So that's an odd question. CW says J-Rob was a decent to good drafter until COVID offseason, and from that draft on, he seemed to become crazy and made a huge amount of mistakes. I don't know what happened. He said that the COVID really threw him off, just crazy. I mean, I think Chris Ballard had a pretty good draft the COVID year, so you had to find a way to work with that. And then after the COVID year, things should have gone back to normal. Franchise best, Dixie asks. Franchise best at yards. Let's retweet on Twitter. Let's give a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. Let's like, rate, and review, please. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, I appreciate all of your support. Become a member of paulkuharsky.com. You'll get the best insight into what's going on with the Titans and why, how they're trying to dig out of what's been a disastrous first season under Brian Callahan, what Amy Adams-Strunk decides to do, what she decides not to do, and why, who the new people are, if there are new people, why the old people are kept in place, if they're kept in place, and all of that. So I urge you to join us. It's well worth it. All podcast Sunday from Lucas Oil Stadium. I'm on the Colts for some reason. From Nissan Stadium press box, the last one after a game, and we'll continue to go twice a week. Thursday afternoons being one, and the time for the Sunday postgame podcast, where we'll put that will be determined. I'll probably poll my members and see where they would want that to be. Ed Henry says, want to embrace stats and analytics more, but this is not a top 2 pass defense. Doesn't pass the eye test to me. Well, that's not an analytics statistic. That's a very old school statistic that analytics would tell you are not very good. So, Rand and Callie failed with Levis, who they all agreed could get the best version out of. Passed on McCarthy, Nix, and Penix. Now, 1 year later, we need a quarterback. Well, I mean, nobody's disagreeing with the fact that they missed on Levis. And yeah, they passed on McCarthy, Nix, and Penix. The decisions in the rearview mirror. I mean, we could spend a lot of time going back and talking about guys that they did not take, that they should have taken. You could do that with every guy who hasn't turned out to be a great success. And we could go, that AJ trade, Pat the Barber says, really did J-Rob in too. And we could go through a lot of moments that did J-Rob in. I think it started with the Isaiah Wilson draft pick. And then he pushed it with a lot of injuries. I would disagree that Dodd was a bad pick that hurt them. But, that's a miss in a draft where there were a lot of hits. And that's gonna happen. Ed says this quarterback class reminds him of Winston and Mariota, and I could see that. That's a hurtful comparison. 2 quarterbacks playing this weekend. It's when you play 2, you don't have 1. We've known they don't have 1 for a long time. We know that. Here's Will Levis talking about one of the best things about him getting a chance to play Sunday against Houston is that hopefully he's not going to end the season like he'd be ending the season if he didn't play this weekend.
I didn't want my last throw to be a pick six, so at least I had a shot at that not being the case. So, like I said, I'm not trying to focus on doing anything specific. All I'm trying to do is play quarterback the best that I can. And like you said, it's an opportunity to try to end the season on a good note.
At least I have a shot at that not being the case. So his last throw was a pick six. And now at least he has a shot at not having his last throw be a pick six. So, I think he's being self-deprecating there and funny. Big aspirations. No momentum. I want to talk about this because, and to their credit, I've not heard this much from the Titans in the locker room. Guys talking about how big a win in the last game of the season is and how much it carries into the offseason, which is bullshit. Because Winning the last game of the season is no different than winning any other game. It does not have any huge carryover because all season long, for the first 16 games, we hear about how the team is going to flush it. They're going to flush it. It's not going to mean anything. Win or lose, we've got to forget about this quickly. So then the 17th game, it's going to stick with them. If it's a win, it's going to stick with them for the whole offseason. It's going to carry all this momentum. But if it's a loss, they'll flush it. So to Callahan's credit, he didn't give too much to this idea of a 17th game win having a lot of momentum. Let's hit that one, JT. We have that one, JT. Callahan on momentum.
Yeah, there's a feel good aspect to finishing the season on a positive note. Does it ultimately propel you any differently? The reality is probably not. Now you win 3 or 4 of them along those lines. That feels a little different. But yeah, ultimately one game isn't going to make or break what you do or how you do it in the off season or where you got to get better or how you have to fix your issues. So yeah, it feels good, and you want to end the season on a win. That's the idea. But yeah, I mean, one singular game at the end of the day is different to me than if you win 3 or 4 in a row to finish the season. That's a little bit different talking point. But yeah, you always want to finish feeling good.
They've not won 3 in a row to finish the season. We know that. Uniforms. People love the Oilers throwbacks, and not because of the throwing back. They love them because it's a really good-looking uniform. I would argue it's the best-looking uniform that's on the shelf. Seattle Supersonics, they don't have the same what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have the same aura about them because they're not as attractive. And so it doesn't matter really what the Oilers did in those uniforms so much as that they're just a really sharp color combo. You don't see a lot of that light blue. That light blue with the red, just sharp. And so the guys are looking forward to playing those uniforms. Never mind that it doesn't mean anything. Hopefully Amy doesn't get carried away and wanting the Oilers to do well against Houston in those uniforms. She cares too much about hating the Texans sometimes. It's 25 years removed, more than that. And, that lease that her dad didn't get with the city of Houston to replace the Astrodome, well, she's now heading into her second building in Nashville. It's turned out to be a pretty damn good deal for her here. So that she's still bemoaning the fact that they didn't get it in Houston. It's kind of slapping the face in Nashville. Like, how long are you going to harbor resent over what you didn't get in Houston while you're getting a $2.2 billion indoor stadium in the middle of downtown Nashville? Let it go. Let it go more. The team played that first Houston game like it was the Super Bowl, and they were hung over from success, which is an embarrassment. But people love these uniforms. Overwhelming opinion that they'd like people to go back to these uniforms as their full-time uniform. I wouldn't object to that at all. You'd have to get the thumbtack or sword. A lot of people prefer the secondary sword logo. You'd have to change its color a little bit to get it to match, at least the red to match the red. On the helmet to replace the oil derrick. Some people are saying go back to being the Oilers, which I think is an absolute ridiculous idea based on the fact that in 1997 and 1998, when the team moved here and Bud Adams desperately wanted to remain the Oilers, there was such a massive uproar from Nashvillians and Tennesseans that he was forced to change the name. So, 25 years later to switch back is pretty crazy. So I don't foresee that ever happening. And, a big deal was made when the Titans changed to these uniforms, whenever that was. That was a big moment for the Titans because they filled downtown in such a giant event, such a giant ceremony that it helped sell the league on Nashville as a town to host the draft, which was a fantastic event. We'll bring the draft here again, undoubtedly, and showed Nashville, we all knew, capable of holding tremendous events here. But I'm all for that color scheme taking over. It's beautiful. I'm a light blue guy. Columbia blue is my color, which existed long before Oilers. But look here at this. This is the lovely menu. Let's get this menu. Off the smoker. Look at all those selections off the smoker here at EDLEY'S Barbecue. And that's not even, Leon's asking somebody for their ID right now. That's not even considering what you get at the bar. Side dishes are on the other side because they can't fit them on this side. But you got to come eat here. Get the brisket, get the pork, get the chicken, ribs. Unbelievable food here. You need to come eat at EDLEY'S. 8 local locations all over the place. There's one near you. 5 Points here in East Nashville. Sylvan Park, Donaldson, Franklin and Berry Farms, Franklin the Factory, Gallatin, 12 South, Nolansville. If you come to 5 Points, say hi to Leon. Tell him Paul, the podcast guy, sent you. He makes a mean margarita. He says there's nobody like him, but there's somebody somewhat comparable to him at all the other restaurants. If you can, get the fried ribs if they're not out of them. They could be out of them because they're so incredibly popular. I wanted to take some home today. They're not available to me. Bet at ZENSPORTS, where if you use TN Paul and bet at least $10, you get a free membership to paulkuharsky.com, $81 annual value. And join paulkuharsky.com. Look, no bullshit from me. I'm not sugarcoating any of this. I'm asking the hard questions. I'm going to get to the bottom of what's going on and why. You guys know that if you've been in on these podcasts. So if you're in on the podcast and you're not in on the site, getting an incomplete deal there. Hill Anthill. Interesting name. Hope things are well. Thanks for your insight. You're welcome. So I'm talking about trading Pollard here. Yeah, it's the one of the few things you've got going well. Everything you trade away that's good, you create a need for. And the Titans need to have fewer needs, not more. So I'm against the idea of trading things that are good. You know, people are for trading Simmons. Well, if you trade Simmons, you got to get a real windfall back. And is Simmons going to get you a 1? I don't think so. Haven't seen a healthy defensive unit. Well, some teams luck into a particularly healthy year. Titans haven't had a healthy year in a long, long time. You've got to be able to play through injuries, and you got to have depth. And by the way, not on the defensive side, but on the offensive side of the ball, Rand Carthon told SiriusXM that the Titans had checked every box, starter and depth, every box. So whatever injuries you want to look at on offense as having had a bearing, injuries should not count as a factor on offense. Checked every box. Should be fine at right tackle based on checking every box. You'd like to know who left the staff for J-Rob that caused them to forget how to draft. No one left the staff. Had nothing to do with the staff. I don't think he listened much to the staff. Why can't it just be J-Rob getting bad somehow? You know, some players get better and some players get worse. And J-Rob, as a GM, got worse. Here, pick up on that. Robert says it still floors me that it got that bad when he started so good. Hard to understand still when no major changes were made in the organization. Well, part of it, he had a big ego. He and Vrabel both had big egos. I wrote at one point that their downfall ultimately, when it came, would be over their big ego. So he loved Caleb Farley, and he looked past the injuries. That's a bad move. And he needed an inner governor that would have told him, look, as much as I'd like this guy, as much promise as I think this guy has, the injury history tells me, odds are bad about him staying healthy. And he hasn't played enough cornerback. The Titans didn't see the red flags, I've been told, that other teams saw about Isaiah Wilson. That's bad scouting. So he just didn't scout as well, and he didn't listen to stuff as well. Oh, if the question about Sanders was Deion Sanders coming here with Shador Sanders, it'd be ridiculous to want that. Blakeville wants loss to the Texans, get the number 1 pick, which also would require New England to lose. Get the number 1 pick, draft Sanders, trade back in the second round. Got to have a willing partner. Lewis gets weirder and weirder. Will, your friend Levis is your quarterback. He doesn't like me. I get along with him fine. I don't know why he wouldn't like me. I gave him every chance. Calling me Paula, like that's some kind of slight. Like you're still in the era where calling a boy a girl is like some big slander. Audrey says pick 6 is definitely on his mind if he mentions it without being asked, which I would say. Let's go to CA here. I've been watching my Oilers Titans since 92. We are once again at rock bottom. This team will either screw up and win or mess up the number 2 pick anyway. As long as this is our leadership, we will still stink. And Jay says we should keep the Oilers uniforms and throw the Titans logo on the helmet. I do think they would require a color adjustment there. That's why. CW thinks they wanted to tank. That's why they started Mason. Just his opinion. When that fumble happened versus the Bengals on that horrible play call execution versus the team has fallen apart completely. Many people thought Mason Rudolph gave him a better chance to win than Levis. You think Levis gave him a better chance to win? I don't know. Vince Troya, very kind words. Thank you. Happy New Year. Paul, your podcast has been one of the few bright spots this season when it comes to the Titan. Vince, I remember our days at a once legitimate outlet. Fond memories. Hope everything's well with you. A new logo with the new stadium would be cool. Focus says, I don't see that coming. Splackleville wants to go after T. Higgins. I don't think an older receiver is the key for this team. I think they need youth. If you're going old amongst receiver, tackle, and edge rusher, go old with the tackle. I'm not sure what is out there in the market, but find that. They need a young receiver for sure, and they need a young edge rusher. They haven't spent on edge rusher nearly enough. CA, maybe a parting shot here. Amy should be more concerned with the Colts than the Texans. Steichen is 4-0, and Luck was 12-0. They've owned us. Cal McNair is harmless. The Texans haven't done anything since we left except for empty calories. 9 wins. I would agree with that. I mean, she doesn't need to be overly concerned with any of them. Be concerned with your team, and don't worry so much about the rest. I agree with that. Do I believe they're more in on Sanders or Ward? I think Sanders is a better fit. I think Ward, look, accuracy and decision making. Ward's great plays are great, but his bad plays are bad. What's up, dude? And I think a little bit of the Levis kind of hit and miss variance with Ward. Would I take a second and a third for Simmons? I probably would. In part, the reason that I would part with Simmons is I think his best ball is behind him, and I think the Titans need a real leadership change. And as long as he's here, they're going to kowtow to him and make him cast him as the team's number 1 leader. And I think that's a mistake. Look, we're at an hour. It's been great. Stay tuned Sunday for another edition of Paul Kuharsky podcast. After this whole thing's over, we'll see if they blow it and win, or if they're in line for at least the number 2 pick in the draft. That'll be a big conversation I look forward to having with you. Do 3 things for me. Subscribe to paulkuharsky.com, because you're going to get the best off-season analysis around there for $7.50 a month. It's the price of a fancy cocktail, a cup of coffee. Sign up for Zen Sports, make some bets there, use code TN Paul. Eat at EDLEY'S Barbecue. Both of those outlets, great sponsors of mine. I really appreciate you. And a fourth thing with 2 parts. Don't block the box, and be sure, please, to lock your locks. Be well, everybody. Thanks.